In 1999, the United States was quietly being taken over by Great Britain. A vigilant patriot named Russell J. Gould recognized the threat, and in a series of strategic moves, he saved us from foreign invasion. He took control of the Title IV U.S. flag and logged it in with the United Nations, becoming sovereign successor to Great Britain. When the political dust had settled, Mr. Gould had taken over several high-ranking government positions, and that put the country's true terrorists on notice. He introduced a language called now-time quantum grammar. Then he used it to prove all previous legal and financial documents to be fraudulent, thus saving the U.S. trillions of dollars in debt. He also redesigned the periodic table of elements. His work was referred to as extraterrestrial technology and genius. But as his reward for his effort, he was arrested and tortured by the government that he saved. Russell J. Gould's rescue of the free world. Join us now as we lay out the facts and answer one very crucial question.
In the year 2007, the mortgage crisis hit the United States. Several of the guys in my unit got together. We were sitting around the shop one day and talking about how we were losing our homes and we were all about to be tossed out on the street. We were really kind of worried about it. As we were sitting around talking shop, we were like, hey, we got the clearances to do this. We know people in the right places. Let's get together and let's see if we can't drum up and figure out what in the heck happened. What in the heck caused this mortgage crisis incident and what really happened there. So after a few months of digging, we had ran across Judge David Wynn Miller and Russell-J. Foucault & Gould, and what they had done to the mortgage industry that they were responsible for. And that was that they had syntaxed the mortgages and found them to be 100% grammatical fraud. And so that was a big eye-opener for us. So we looked at that and we were like, hey, so it wasn't the subprime mortgage lending that led to the collapse. It was the fact that these guys had syntaxed the actual contracts, the banking and mortgage contracts, and found them to be 100% grammatical fraud. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac immediately bundled those up and sold them to Bank of America. And 3 days later, when Bank of America found out they were sitting on bad paper, they sold them to, I believe it was Wells Fargo. And from there, the fire sales had started with these bundled mortgages. So with that, we started digging deeper. Well, who is Russell J. Gould and who is David Wynn Miller? But what really unlocked the entire mystery for us was the fact that there was a grammar key on the mortgages that had been syntaxed, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac mortgages that were syntaxed by these guys. They had a grammar key or a syntax key on the side of the paperwork. And so we were like, okay, well, we understand how syntax works and how there was grammatical fraud going on, but what gave this key, this syntax key that they were putting on the paperwork, the power to syntax that document? And with that, that's when we uncovered the largest national security secret in this nation's history, if not the world itself. So what this did was it led us down, basically this led us down several rabbit holes. And one of the rabbit holes that it led us down was we had to start, first we had to go all the way back to the beginning of U.S. history or American history to figure out what in the world was going on there, because this goes back that far. So we went all the way back to the start of the 13 colonies and the original bankruptcy of the United States, and that's really what this all stems from, is the bankruptcy of the United States, the first bankruptcy. And so when the 13 colonies was fighting for its freedom from the British Crown, there was a post office down in Philadelphia, and that was the Benjamin Franklin Post Office. And that post office was open until the war started, and because all war vacates contracts. So because the 13 colonies weren't yet an independent nation state of their own, or a nation of their own, they had to close that post office down because they were fighting for that national statehood. And after the American Revolution, that post office couldn't be opened back up because it was in a state of bankruptcy. It owed 1.6 million francs to the French for funding the American Revolution. So at that point, Spain and France argued over who was going to put the Postmaster General position here in the colonies to open it up to commerce. And why is that important? Why was that so important? Well, when we take a look at it, Spain argued that they had found America first, that Christopher Columbus had found America first, and so they had rights to it. France argued that without loaning America the 1.6 million francs, America wouldn't even be open for capture. But the King of Great Britain, or Great Britain still being the reigning monarch in the world, told Spain and France, I'm still the reigning monarch in the world, and I'm going to put my post office in up there. Those are my people. And when we went back and looked at the American history, you could see that the founders of the Republic talked about that. They said that they would much rather have chosen Great Britain as opposed to Spain or France, because they were used to Great Britain's wiles. They understood how that monarch operated. And so they decided that it was best to just continue working with him, because they knew how he operated, and they knew the wiles of this guy's operation and how his construct worked. And they weren't too sure about Spain or France, and didn't want to start getting involved with someone they didn't know anything about. So they decided to go ahead and joined her with Great Britain, and they put the post office in Washington, D.C., Great Britain's post office in Washington, D.C., which is a foreign enclave of the United States. It never has been part of the United States, and it was opened up as the District of Columbia, as a foreign enclave, because it was the post office for Great Britain. So what that means is that the King of Great Britain, placing his post office here, opened up commerce to the rest of the world, because he was the reigning monarch. So if the rest of the monarchs or dictators wanted to come into this country and rape and pillage it for its goods, they would have to go through him and his post office. So everything that was shipped in and out of this country, all commerce, he got a piece of through that post office. So that was the first bankruptcy, was Benjamin Franklin borrowed 1.6 million francs from the French. The second bankruptcy started when Abraham Lincoln borrowed the money from the IMF and the World Bank. Now, before I get into that, I want to say this. So the Founding Fathers had a pact, and that was that an accord, a gentleman's agreement between themselves, and that was that they were to never borrow any money from the IMF and the World Bank. And that is because the IMF and the World Banks owe no allegiance to any one particular monarch. And so they decided, the agreement was that they would only borrow money from other monarchs, because the monarchs were only as powerful as their armies. And if they stayed in contract with two monarchs at the same time, if one monarch ever decided to try and invade the colonies, they would have to concur with the other monarch first before they could invade, so they didn't mess up something that other monarch had going on. So it gave the colonies time to react and get a plan in place to go ahead and move forward and try to figure out how to get themselves out of whatever debacle they might have found themselves in. So at a later time, as we went through the historical records and we ran into, of course, the Civil War was next, we found out that Abraham Lincoln, after the colonies dissolved and they broke in half, there was no more United States. It had ended, the North against the South. So you have two separate countries fighting against each other, essentially, is what happened here during the Civil War, because the South did raise its own flag and did substantiate itself as its own nation state. Abraham Lincoln, we found, violated the pact. He was the president that went ahead and borrowed money from the IMF and the World Bank, thereby violating the gentleman's agreement or the accord that the Founding Fathers had to never do that. And when he did, he initiated the beginning of the second international bankruptcy. That led us down into, of course, 1933 to the beginning of the third and final international bankruptcy, and also the Great Depression, the stock market crash of 1929. And from there, this is all laid out historically with what happened in relation to this Syntax key that had been placed on these mortgages. And this is how far back we had to track to find out what in the world gave this Syntax key power to be utilized on these mortgage contracts to conduct the Syntax in the manner that had been conducted to validate the fact that they were all grammatical fraud, banking fraud, grammar fraud, you name it, fraud. Once we had backtracked that key and found out Hal was given the authority to be placed on that contract to conduct the syntacking that it had conducted, we ran across the largest national security secret ever covered up in the history of the United States. So this led us right back into the birth certificate and how the birth certificate system even got started here in America.
People are used as collateral with other nations because the U.S. is bankrupt. The United States declared bankruptcy on March 9th of 1933. At this point, the U.S. began taking out loans from a private, non-government affiliated corporation called the Federal Reserve. With no money to pay back the loans, the United States began using the citizens as collateral.
And that started back in 1933 with the beginning of the third and final international bankruptcy. And of course, we had found out at that point that the United States owed so much to the IMF and the World Bank for what Lincoln had done that Roosevelt had to give up all of the gold that was here in the United States to pay off the debt to the IMF and the World Bank. So the United States was completely broke. We had no money. And so they devised the birth certificate system, in which case the people themselves were the gold bars, became the gold bars. And they had been built for taxes to pay off whatever debt was still remained, whatever debt still remained, or whatever debt was still going to be incurred by the financial needs of the United States. And that system came to an end on November 2nd, 1999. That entire system came to an end. And with that, like I said, we uncovered the largest national security secret ever kept in the history of the United States. We still don't know why it's been kept a secret. We have a good idea of why it's been kept a secret, because we understand now that the deep state's in charge. We understand who the deep state is, we know how they operate, and this has been one of the largest deep state secrets in the history of the United States. And we're bringing it forward, because we understand what the hell happened. So you think to yourself, okay, well, it's a birth certificate system, so what? So they use the people as chattel to create an income off of, so they could substantiate the wealth that was necessary to go ahead and get us through our administrative ordeals as a nation. As we got looking at this thing, and we researched it further and deeper into what the birth certificate system was, this thing was attached to the largest warfare platform in the world that was essentially created to go ahead and capture everybody on the planet as chattel or property. And this was how they were going to go ahead and create their wealth off the sweat of everybody else's backs. And so this led us, of course, right back to the Vatican, London City, and the Pentagon. And those were the three locations on planet Earth, the three war castles, so to speak, that substantiated the empire of the three city-states. And I encourage all you guys out there to take a look at the empire of the three city-states and do your research on the empire of the three city-states and exactly what that is. The Vatican itself, when we looked at the Vatican, this place was just the esotericism there, the esoteric symbolism behind this entire warfare platform was all over it. I mean, this thing just reeked of esoteric knowledge. It was just, the symbols were everywhere. Now with the Gregorian calendar, they tell you what day Monday is, what day Tuesday is, what day Wednesday is. And that is the calendar all the stock markets on planet Earth use to pay out to. All shipping and commerce moves by that calendar. So these guys, we found out, have nothing to do with Jesus Christ. They have nothing to do with God. They literally watch the movement and shipment of all commerce. And they say, or they claim, that they have been given, they have heavenly authorizations to be in command and control of those shipping lanes and those timelines, to watch the shipment and movement of all commerce. So basically all they do is watch the shipment and movement of all monies and all cargo on planet Earth, to include the militaries, because you can't move militaries without money being somewhere first. So these guys know where the wars are going to be, they know where they're going to start, and they know who's behind starting them and finishing them off. That's what we found out in the long run. So we took a look at how all this worked. It ran back to the 3 international bankruptcies, like I said, and the third and final international bankruptcy came to an end in 1999. And when that happened, the post office that Great Britain had opened up in the enclave of Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, had to close down. The king had to vacate the position, and the trustee for the bankruptcy had always been the President of the United States. He was the United States. He was the administrator for the bankruptcy, always has been. Well, with the end of the third and final international bankruptcy, the post office was closed down, and so we no longer needed a trustee because there was no more bankruptcy. But that was the long-range warfare plan of Great Britain, was to use the IMF and the World Bank because they knew we weren't going to be able to pay back the interest that Abraham Lincoln had incurred by borrowing the money from the IMF in the first place. And with the end of the third and final international bankruptcy, the king would step in, pay the debt to the IMF and the World Bank off, and capture the United States back again as part of Great Britain, and we'd all become peasants and serfs again. But the post office had closed down, and he had to vacate. Well, during that time that he had to vacate, there was 18 days there that post office was vacant. And during that time, Russell-J. Foucault and David-Wynne Miller had seen this whole thing coming. They had been studying the bankruptcies. These guys were great at it. They understood the courts and the ports, and they understood that the neutral ports were the courts. And with that, Russell, understanding what was about to take place here, ran up to the Pentagon and asked the Pentagon if they had a copyright and patent on the Title IV flag for the United States, the Title IV flag. And of course the Pentagon told him, no one's ever asked us that before, Russ, and he said it doesn't matter anyway because the grammar on the contract was all grammar fraud. I've syntaxed it and disqualified it, and my country's about to be captured, and as an American, I have the right to protect my flag and my nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and this was a domestic takeover. So he captures the flag, takes off to the United Nations, legs in at the United Nations, and when the United Nations said, okay, but all the land on planet Earth is taken up, Russ, what land do you choose? He said, well, we choose the land of the courts during the time of the contract. And of course, with that gave them the highest and most powerful court on planet Earth. He turns around, and during that 18-day vacancy, he legs back in as Postmaster General here for the United States and keeps the continuance of the evidence for the post office open to allow commerce to still be conducted, but under his authority, not under Great Britain's any longer. So he had just succeeded Great Britain as the sovereign because he was given sovereignty status by the United Nations that allowed him to authorize the conduction of all commerce and the continuance of that commerce here in the United States. And now we took a big look at that and we were like, holy cow. So the Navy's sitting in foreign ports around the world. The Florida Chads, during the 1999 Florida Chads, the United States ceased to exist for 90 days. It was done. But there was an 18-day period in there where the post office was closed down. There was no longer a president. There was no longer a need for a middleman or a trustee anymore. So the Navy's sitting in foreign ports around the world with no country, and Russ had just taken the flag, and they have no flag. So they're sitting in foreign ports around the world in warships, and I'm sure all the weapons were like, what nation are you guys from, and where's your flag at? And when we went through the presidential paperwork and the congressional record, this is all chronicled in the congressional record and the presidential paperwork that we had ran across for that day, that we had found with what happened was that Bill Clinton was halfway around the world in Kosovo with the National Security Council. At 9 a.m. in the morning, he got a phone call from here in the United States telling him that the Title IV flag had just been captured by Foucault and Russell-J. Foucault and Gould and Foucault and David-Wynne Foucault and Miller. And it was now their new flag. They had just saved the United States from a surrender and takeover of Great Britain, this orchestrated long-range warfare attack that these guys had spent 200 years orchestrating had been stopped in its tracks by these guys. So the Navy immediately signed on with Russ in 2003, and we're like, you're the new sovereign for the country, you got the flag, you saved the United States from surrender and takeover. Outstanding, no one's ever done that. And he legged in with them, and leased the flag to the Navy so the Navy could continue to conduct its commerce, its shipment, because the Navy's all shipping. So they were able to ship themselves around the world and continue to protect the United States in a defensive posture, or offensively should they need to move to an offensive posture. Russell J. Gould had quietly become the new, we'll call him Commander-in-Chief of the North American continent, the United States, and also Canada. And it has to do with postal. So Russell took over as Postmaster General here in the United States, and the Canada Post Office has always been attached to that location. So he took over as the Canada Postmaster General as well, taking command and control of the entire North American continent in the process. So this is when we started hearing a bunch of stuff about how the U.S. Constitution had come to an end. We were hearing the administration up in Washington, D.C. tell us, hey, there is no Constitution. And we couldn't figure that out. We were like, what in the hell are you guys talking about? There's no U.S. Constitution. Well, it wasn't the actual U.S. Constitution itself that dissolved in relation to the Bill of Rights and your freedoms here and the way the government operates as far as the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. But in relation to that, they were saying that there was no U.S. Constitution. But it wasn't so much that, like I said, that the U.S. Constitution itself dissolved. It was the banking constitution that constituted the United States. That end of the Constitution, the outline for the banking constitution, had come to an end. It was the end of the third and final international bankruptcy, so we no longer needed a trustee. So the people of the United States would then have to be informed, hey, we now need to reconsolidate and resubstantiate the entire country. We need to pick a new Senate. We need to pick a new Congress. We need to pick a new president or elect a new president. And we have to go through the entire rebuilding process for the United States to move forward in a quantum manner, because the new Postmaster General system is all quantum. And he was the only person in the history of the world to do this, set up this quantum construct. And we'll get into that quantum construct here in a little bit, but I wanted to tell you guys about the rumors we were hearing about the U.S. Constitution coming to an end. It wasn't the U.S. Constitution and our laws and our liberties. It was the fact that the banking constitution had come to an end and was closed out with the end of the third and final international bankruptcy. And with that, the birth certificate system here in the United States ended. And so there's all the little kids that have been born since 1999 aren't supposed to be born on a birth certificate system. And the birth certificate system itself, when we looked at that, was one of the most nefarious pieces of the empire of the three city-states warfare platform to capture everybody as peasants or serfs or chattel property. And when we sat back and took a good look at the birth certificate system, when you're born on this planet and your mother has you in her arms in the hospital when you're first born, the RN comes in the room and says, hey, you need to sign this birth certificate before you can leave the hospital with the baby, or you can't leave with the baby. Well, that's a lie. You're trying to tell me I can't leave the hospital with my child unless I sign this document, this birth certificate document? That's kidnapping. That's illegal. You can't take my baby from me and hold my baby just because I don't sign your document. That's crazy. So what we found out was that the baby's name is all in capital letters on the birth certificate. And when your mom signs that thing, she signs in cursive, which is considered necromancy, communication with the dead. Well, the only place you find all capital letters in anyone's name is on a tombstone. That's the only place you're supposed to find it. You're a dead entity. Well, when you're born into this world, you're considered a dead entity due to the shipping war that we're all in. So you're automatically, when she signs that document, and everybody signs in cursive, she's conducting necromancy, communicating with the dead. And when you're legged into that massive corporate construct of the empire of the three city-states, you're automatically presumed missing, dead, or presumed lost at sea. So you're a dead person. You're just a piece of cargo. So when you take a big look at this in relation to the esoteric symbolism behind what the Vatican is doing and what London City and those guys are doing, and the P2 Mason lodges, the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Columbus, and the Jesuits, which is the militia for the Vatican. This group of people are the secret lodges on this planet, and they utilize this shipping warfare system to conduct commerce on planet Earth. It's how they make their riches. quite frankly, we found that a little aggravating. I mean, we were pretty upset when we got to the bottom of what the birth certificate system is. It's claiming that you are owned. You know, you're a piece of cargo and that you're owned. Owned by whom? Well, we're owned by the Vatican. And they claim a lot more than just your body. They're literally claiming things within you. I would go so far as to say your soul. And I mean, you want to talk about a construct, a warfare platform on this planet that is nothing but nefaric. That is it. The Vatican is the location. So what we were looking at was, with this global system of governance, was we'll just call her a female. We'll call her, as a matter of fact, it's the Great Whore of Babylon. She's the Great Whore of Babylon, as clearly laid out in the Bible. This system is based in Admiralty and Maritime, the International Admiralty and Maritime Law of the Sea. And all of the corporations on planet Earth, to include the Empire of the Three City-States specifically, contribute to the strengths and the existence of this system, this female, we'll call her. In relation to what Commander-in-Chief Russell J. Gould has done with his system, was that he created a now time scenario, and with that, of course, he had his own elemental table and a periodic table and elemental chart, and his elemental chart was so genius in its construct that it destroyed the previous elementals chart. And when it did that, it took down the planet's ability to communicate. It has just destroyed all the nations' ability to communicate with one another in relation to shipping and the movement of commerce, because they could not create a mathematical fact or a 0 point to base their sums and differences upon. So it destroyed their ability to communicate with one another. So when he went back in and captured the position as Postmaster General here in the United States and resubstantiated all commerce, he had to reopen the United States back up to international trade and commerce. And when he did that, he had to physically go into the locations on planet Earth, such as the International Trade Organization, World Trade Organization, and leg in as the American, the last American standing here in the United States that had the flag, had a banking constitution, had his own elemental chart and periodic table, to say, hey, I'm open for business and I want to open commerce back up. And so he went to these locations, to these giant corporations, and when he did, he disqualified that position because the syntax was found to be fraudulent. It was grammar fraud in relation to what he had constructed, because he had rebuilt the entire system for communication. And so the old communication system was thereby destroyed. So with it being destroyed, he's now got to go into these locations anyway, not just to set up international commerce for the United States, but to set them up properly, because they were destroyed with his construct. So now as he sets them back up proper, the Whore of Babylon that was once using International Admiralty and Maritime Law of the Sea to claim everyone as presumed missing, dead, or lost at sea. And when we went back to biblical scripture, of course, and this leads all the way back to that, Satan accuses man day and night in front of the throne of God as already being dead. And when you further look at the esotericism behind that, he's basically trying to mirror what God did. And God destroyed the world by a flood. Well, Lucifer's trying to do the same thing. He's killing all the people on the planet by saying they're presumed missing, dead, or lost at sea with a birth certificate system. So it's a mirror of what God has already done. This stuff goes all the way back into biblical prophecy, and the esotericism behind this warfare platform is demonstrated clearly by the Vatican with what's going on. And so it's speaking to us. It's in plain sight and right in the open, right in front of all of our faces. So as Russ set this system back up and went to each corporate location to say, hey, he started at the Universal Postal Union up in Bern, Switzerland, and said, hey, charter's been disqualified. So I'm reopening it up properly and placing myself in as the Universal Postmaster General in Bern, Switzerland. So he did that. And each time he did that, he reconstituted the Whore of Babylon and made her a correct version. So now you got a mirrored image, a mirrored version of exactly what once was, but correctly. And so he used that whole system which was the system the United States was using anyway. But now he's got it, and it's correct. The whole thing is correct. And it took down all the global powers on the planet in the process, but resubstantiated them in correctness. So they haven't gone anywhere. They just had to adopt the new system. And with that system, there's no longer any ability to create contract fraud in that system. You can't lie, cheat, or steal, or create a loophole in the contract because it's a mathematically certifiable grammar. So what it says is what it means, and what it means is what it says, and it's certified forward and backward. So they can't take this into court later and say, oh, what it meant was, or what it's supposed to mean later is this, because there's, in his now time construct with his grammatical construct, there is no past and future tense verbiage in the grammatical construct. So what it means is what it says now and forever. So in 100 years when they pick that contract up and they say, well, what it was supposed to mean or what it is to mean later doesn't apply. It says now, is and are. What it is now. So it's still in now time. So 100 years from now they can pick it up and say, wow, no, it still says today. Nothing to argue over here. So if you violate the contract, it's obvious, and you're busted for it. They'll take you to court. Of course, the ramifications behind that and the litany of charges that could be created would eliminate the opportunity for fraudsters and racketeers to try to take advantage of that system. It would be removed. When you further go back to look at this and take a real serious look and examine this entire thing, and we spent years on this now. We've spent a decade researching this entire matter. So what this gentleman has done is, with his construct, he has taken command and control of the entire planet. The construct that was there, he took command and control of and resubstantiated it, he mirrored it, but in a correct manner, using grammar correctly, using the word, the meaning of the word correctly. And with that, the powers that be lost all their powers. And of course, they had come unglued on this guy. They tried to get him to surrender the flag. They beat him pretty bad. Took him into court because what he had done was he had started court-martialing Bush and Cheney and 500 admirals and generals for not immediately jumping onto his plane and immediately initiating the changeover of the new government to take place all the way down to the civil level, so that contracts written by civil governments and state governments would all be operating with this quantum grammar construct, so that you couldn't racketeer anymore. There'd be no way to launder money to move pedophiles or guns or drugs or anything like that. The money was going to go where it was supposed to go. You couldn't borrow from the school slush fund to pay for the roads. That would be gone. That whole borrowing system of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul would be gone, and it was dissolved. And he wanted that correction made immediately. And because that didn't happen, and they didn't join with him immediately, he court-martialed them. He started court-martialing everybody, saying there is no president. And of course, with the Florida Chads, the Bush and Cheney Florida Chad sideshow. Once Bush was appointed, and he was appointed, he was not elected, and that's why you hear Trump today saying it's all rigged and we're stopping it. It's all fraud and we're ending it. Is because those guys, Bush and Clinton and Obama, were placed in there by this New World Order, this shadow government, deep state, global apparatus that has been trying to capture the world and place everybody under a birth certificate system. So, because he had moved so rapidly with what he had done, he didn't have time to alert the NCO chain of command to say, hey guys, this is what's going on with the bankruptcy. They're about to surrender to the United States and raise a British flag here, and they're going to capture you all as chattel again, raise a British flag here, seize your guns. They put FEMA camps in place. Obama was coming for him. And thank God we did not get Hillary Clinton in there, because she was the final stake in the heart. When we look at what's happening there, as far as the verbiage goes, the double speak these guys are using, this New World Order apparatus, the double speak they use, when you examine the tapes, when you go back and look at the New World Order tapes of President Bush Sr. talking, saying, you know, we're going to have We need to create laws that will protect the weak from the strong.
A world where the strong respect the rights of the weak.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. A world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations.
He's not talking about weak people as far as this person who's unemployed. He's talking about the weak people, the New World Order being so few against the strong, the people of the world who don't want this apparatus to come into play, that know what these guys have up their sleeve in the long run. We've read the Bible. We know what it looks like. We know what they want to bring into fruition. We know what's coming. The playbook's in your hands. Everybody's got one. And so when he's saying we want to protect the weak from the strong and have freedom and peace, he's talking about the freedom to stop the rest of the world from allowing these guys to make laws freely and in peace so that they can't be stopped by the people. That's the doublespeak these guys are using, and it's very, very nefarious when you listen to it and you realize these guys aren't talking to the American people. They're talking to their bosses behind them. So with that, this entire system that Commander-in-Chief Russell J. Gould has taken over, he's corrected that system and taken it out of their hands, because the entire international admiralty and maritime law of the sea system, he rewrote all the codes and statutes and laws in relation to that and quantized everything into a mathematical, grammatical fact, disqualifying the old system, because it was all grammar fraud. So he's taken tactical command and control of the entire system and taken it away from these guys, like taking matches from a little kid and spanking him on the backside for trying to burn the house down. That's exactly what this guy has done. In relation to a one world global government or a new world order, Commander-in-Chief Russell J. Gould's system is not that biblical or biblically prophesied one world government, new world order that is going to be so tyrannical that it crushes everyone beneath its foot. He literally stopped that from happening. And because they didn't want to play with him, because of what he had done was so great, and he had moved so fast, and he only alerted the upper echelons and told the bad guys, hey, I'm taking command and control here. He failed, and a huge oversight on his part was that he failed to tell the non-commissioned officer chain of command in the military what he was doing so people could get behind him and thank him for saving the country from, one, a surrender and takeover, and from, two, the New World Order apparatus's attempt to conquer the planet. He stopped it right in his tracks, but because he moved so fast and didn't alert the rest of the military, the bad guys kicked him to the side and placed in the Federal Reserve. So the banks moved in, the Federal Reserve Board moved into the Postmaster General position up in Washington, D.C., and chose the new Postmaster General. And that's all chronicled in the Congressional Record, which is all to be found in the 1999 Government Reformation Act. The government needed to be restructured anyway, because it was the end of the third and final international bankruptcy. But prior to that, we know this was a takeover attempt and a surrender attempt back to Great Britain, because the Amero was sitting there waiting prior to the end of the third and final international bankruptcy in 1999. They had the Amero set. They were waiting to get the Americans to join the European Union. It was already in place. We were this close to being surrendered, and he stopped it in its tracks. So when that happened, like I said, they didn't want to play ball with him. And as we looked at what was happening there, the P2 Mason lodges, the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Columbus, and the Jesuits were losing their minds. I mean, these guys were pulling their hair out, because Russell J. Gould was not groomed by the P2 Mason lodges. He's not a Mason. He's not a Knight of Columbus. He's not a Knight of Malta. He's not a Jesuit. He's an American. A guy from Wyoming who was smart enough to figure this whole thing out and save the country from being surrendered. So with that, no one wanted to play with him because there was no way to control this guy. There's no way to blackmail this individual. You can't pin pedophilia on him. You can't pin, racketeering on him. He has done nothing but save the nation, set up a whole new construct globally. So because there's no way to blackmail or control this guy, they don't want to let him take over because he doesn't adhere to their standard operating procedures. He doesn't adhere to any other of their beliefs, their belief systems, their belief structure, and they did not want to let him take tactical command and control the way he had. So after 12 years of these guys not wanting to play ball and just move forward in a factual manner in relation to what really took place here on this planet, in relation to the United States coming to the end of its third and final international bankruptcy, in relation to the fact that this gentleman captured the flag, in relation to the fact that this gentleman legged into the United Nations, and in relation to the fact that he was declared a sovereign, and in relation to the fact that he legged back in here at the post office in Washington, D.C. in the United States, taking tactical command and control of the jurisdiction or the District of Columbia and all of the war powers. They didn't want to play ball at that, so he, at that point, mails himself around the world and sets up this entire global construct. It says, okay, well, I'll just go ahead and open the United States up, I'll open my government system back up, and in the process, take it all down. And the last thing he did was in 2012, after these guys moved forward for 12 years in an act of fraud, basically is what they did, because in reality what happened, they didn't tell the American people, hey, we need a new banking constitution created. We need a new Senate elected. We need a new Congress elected. We need to resubstantiate how we're going to bring forward a president and what he's going to be in charge of, and set the parameters up for that, what he will be in charge of, how the bankruptcy will work if we're even still going to ever have to go through another bankruptcy, but how Russell's banking system worked. The president was to be in charge of that. He would be the administrator of the finances still. So the system for the system of government for the United States didn't necessarily come to an end. It just needed to be, the new system needed to be recognized, and it needed to be brought into place. It just needed to be brought forward, and we could have kept going forward in a factual, proper manner in relation to what actually happened on planet Earth. But instead, they didn't want to play that, and they put in the Federal Reserve in there in Washington, D.C., and they've moved forward the way they have for the last 17 years. So after a 12-year run, on December 21st, 2012, Commander-in-Chief Russell J. Gould and David Wynn Miller went down and opened up the Benjamin Franklin Post Office in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, when you look at Washington, D.C., you have Admiralty. That is the Admiralty and Maritime Jurisdiction of the Sea, because it belonged to the King of Great Britain. And that's how he runs his country, under the Admiralty and Maritime Law of the Sea. Everybody's considered a little boat or a little vessel or a piece of cargo that's presumed missing, dead, or lost at sea. Same thing here in the United States. So that's the Admiralty and Maritime Jurisdiction of the Sea. So then he goes down to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is the civil jurisdiction law of the land, and opens up the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania post office, which had been closed down with the start of the American Revolution. And it couldn't be opened back up because they owed 1.6 million francs to the French, so they were in bankruptcy. Bankrupt people can't contract, so they weren't allowed to open up commerce through that post office. So D.C. had to come in and put its post office, Great Britain had to come in and put its post office in up there. If they didn't, Spain or France was going to do it. So, by opening up the Benjamin Franklin Post Office in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, he took the entire government system back down to the original location along with the flag, and posted that Title IV flag up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And by doing so, since the birth certificate system ended, he now presents everybody with a claim of the life, thereby shipping you out of the land of the dead and back onto the land in the civil jurisdiction, law of the land, where the blood testifies to the life. And with that, reconstitutes the entire American government, again, in a proper manner, under the correct Title IV flag, using the correct communication, parse, syntax, grammar, to establish all of his systems of government on this planet for you to then conduct commerce here in the United States. There are no more laws, rules, and regulations in relation to the old system. They've all been disqualified. So in 2017, Commander-in-Chief Russell J. Gould goes back to the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C. And since the building was supposed to have left the United States because the end of the third and final international bankruptcy had come to an end, the Federal Reserve was, the Internal Revenue Service, which was the collection agency for the debt, had to be kicked out of the country because the bankruptcy had come to an end. It was over. So the Federal Reserve should have ended as well. But because it didn't leave, and for 17 years it sat there operating in a fraudulent manner, Commander-in-Chief Russell J. Gould goes down there and tells those guys, hey, why is this building docked on my land? I'm levying a fine against you. So he levied a fine against the Federal Reserve Board of Governors for having that vessel docked on his property. And the fine was 17 million tons of gold that he wants to use to assist Mr. Donald John Trump and Mr. James Mattis, Secretary of Defense, and the rest of the military and the people of this country to resubstantiate the government here, back the nation up, and create a new monetary system and place the values in his bank and on his platforms, place those values on his stock market platforms so that the United States can start conducting international commerce and trade again. He's been trying as hard as he can to try to get Mr. Donald John Trump's attention, to try to let him know what he's doing. He's trying to give Mr. Trump a flag and let him know, hey, I'd like to authorize what it is you're doing. I'm behind you with the clean out. 110%. This is something that he tried in 1999 to clean this apparatus out in 1999 and couldn't do it because he didn't alert the military and no one knew what he had done. He moved so fast no one knew what he had done. So the bad guys, the deep state, kicked him to the curb and kept moving forward. And that deep state apparatus is the deep state apparatus that Donald Trump is now finally cleaning out of Washington, D.C. And this is the reason we're bringing this forward. This is the largest national security secret in the history of the nation, if not the world itself, in relation to how it took down all the powers globally, how it was reconstructed, in relation to the mortgage, housing, financial crisis of 2007. This entire national security secret was revealed to us. We've gone through the congressional record, we've gone through the presidential papers, everything's there, it's all chronicled there. You can find it there. We've listened to the Navy SEALs scream, we've listened to my commanding general, Major General Jerry Boykin, say get involved. The Navy SEALs are yelling to get involved. Everybody's yelling get involved to us former special operations guys, to us military personnel, current, past, future, present. Get involved, figure out what's gone wrong, and fix it. Well, it's been fixed, guys, and it's been kept from us for 17 years. This gentleman's a national hero and deserves a medal of the highest honor. He saved the country, he saved the flag, he saved us from a secret surrender, and domestic takeover here in the United States that nobody even ever saw coming. And I'm sure that when the attorney generals and the rest of the people here in the United States get a hold of this story, and they do the research on the 3 international bankruptcies of the United States, and they see how this apparatus works, they're going to come to the conclusion, the same conclusion we have in relation to what we found here. What is literally staring us right in our faces all day long. And that is that this gentleman deserves a medal of the highest honor and is quite frankly a national hero. What's going to happen if the United States doesn't adopt this new quantum system? Because it has its own elemental chart and its own periodic tables, this thing was considered genius by the Department of Energy. And the rest of the world got a hold of this thing. And I can tell you right now that if the United States does not adopt this system and this system of grammar to create contracts on this planet, the bad guys will. And if those guys start creating contracts and subject the United States to their whims and their wills in relation to this construct. They will crush us like we have never been crushed before. Laws will be ironclad. Regulations will be ironclad. However, if they do not have Commander-in-Chief Russell-J Gould's thumbprint and signature on those documents to substantiate the executive authority required to legitimize such a document, it's not legal. But I can tell you this much: if we don't adopt it, the bad guys will, and they'll crush us. They cannot get around the elemental chart and periodic table. They cannot get around the mathematical construct of that grammar. It's a fact. It is what it is, and it's taken down all that it's taken down. So from where is it that they have the ability to move forward from in a manner that would allow them to disqualify such a platform? They can't. So if we don't join with it, they'll take it, and it will be to our ruin. So the yellow fringe flag doesn't come from any nation. It's not registered. All flags are registered around the world with the United Nations. None of them in their copyright and patent have a yellow fringe on them. The yellow fringe was added after because everything's been captured in the international admiralty and maritime jurisdiction of the sea in a shipping war. So the yellow fringe denotes that it's been captured by the shipping war. But the shipping war is based in the international admiralty and maritime law of the sea. So the yellow fringe flag doesn't have a nation because the sea is not a nation. It's not registered as a nation with the United Nations. So when he captured the Title IV flag, as clearly laid out in Army regulation, the yellow fringe is a desecration of the flag. So he removed it because he destroyed the international admiralty and maritime jurisdiction of the sea when he took it over. So he removed the yellow fringe off it because he's captured the shipping war and released everybody from it by shipping them back in onto the land, at least here in the United States. So the yellow fringe flag doesn't have a nation. It's based in international admiralty and maritime law of the sea. Well, the sea is not a nation. It's not registered at the United Nations as a nation. So the yellow fringe flag is a flag of the sea. Well, the sea is nothing. So it's a flag of nothing. Basically, it's a corporation. It's a huge corporation, but they're using that admiralty and maritime jurisdiction in violation of its jurisdiction on the land in an act of warfare against the people, saying you're all boats and little vessels. Well, you can only claim a little boat or a little vessel if I'm out in the middle of the water. As your flag clearly denotes, you have a yellow flag or yellow fringe around it, saying we're at admiralty and maritime law of the sea. Well, if you're on the land, you're in violation of your jurisdiction, therefore you're conducting inland piracy. So these guys and their entire system globally, they are nothing more than pirates. That's all they are, and they've declared everybody else to be a vessel or cargo that they can rape, plunder, and pillage. So they're literally, this is a global group of pirates is what this is. So, yeah, wild, right? Wild. Over the last 10 years, we have gone and spoke with Commander-in-Chief Russell-J Gould several times. And he has continually told us time and time again that he's tried to reach out to Washington, D.C., to the administrative personnel up there to tell them what it is he's done, because this is being kept a massive secret away from the masses. And he keeps trying to make contact. And every time he does, he's not recognized, or his work is obfuscated. But he's been trying to get up there this last year to tell President Donald John Trump that, hey, this is what has happened, and I'd like to give you all the authorization in the world that you need to run the country legitimately, and I will back you all the way, but you've got to reach out to me. And he keeps trying to get up there and tell the guys, hey, this is the reality of what's happened here. You know, I know you think there's something else, but it's not. When you look at the 3 international bankruptcies of the United States, this gentleman has walked this out. And it has been done. And he did it. And it needs to be recognized by the rest of us. And this is why we're bringing it forward to the rest of our community, to the Special Operations Command community, to the SEALs, to the Green Berets, guys like Ben Smith, who had the balls to step forward and make a stand, to the guys like Larry Ward, who had the balls to step forward and take the stand. This gentleman had the balls to step forward and take the stand for this entire nation. He captured the flag. He rebuilt the Constitution, the banking Constitution. He resubstantiated the entire global construct in a correct manner in an effort to correct the criminal malfeasance that is running wild on this planet, that none of us are happy with. A birth certificate system that has us all enslaved to it from cradle to grave, to include our children for generations to come, that literally ended in 1999. This entire system ended in 1999, and he's been trying to tell everybody, hey, look what I've done. Take a look. Stop with the Black Lives Matter. Stop with the race wars. Stop with the sideshows. Stop all this stuff and take a minute to look at what's happened here in the United States in relation to those 3 bankruptcies. And you will see what this guy has done. And the tyranny that we are all under the oppression of, these laws and these rules and these regulations that are being stuffed down our throats through the state's territories by the former 3 administrations that have been there since 1999 to 2017. And thank God Trump came forward. And thank God he's in there. And we're behind everything he's doing. In relation to all of that, the system has been corrected. And we're bringing this story forward to the rest of the Special Operations community for review. I'm urging you guys, look at this information. Look at the congressional record. Look at what's happened. Listen to his story. Listen to this gentleman tell you what has happened, and take a look at the construct. Because if we let this one go, I'm urging you guys, gentlemen, please, the guys in the Special Operations community, the guys out there that have urged us to find out what in the hell has gone wrong with the country, this is it. This is what has gone wrong with the country. And I'm urging you guys to research all of this. Take this seriously. Open your minds and open your eyes to it. Because it happened. This is a very old Masonic system that's operating here on planet Earth, and it is all based upon shipping and postal wars that have morphed into banking wars. Okay, so the 3 really work together hand in hand, but the banking warfare has really kicked off here as of late in relation to this whole thing. So when you're born here on this planet, or here on this planet, you are born of the water, right? Because this is a shipping war. You're all captured in a shipping warfare that you're unaware of, that you've been captured into. So when you're born of your mother's water. And you are docked as a vessel by a doctor, who is a registered harbor master by the port authorities and authorized by the Department of Transportation. And when you are docked by the doctor, you are then harbored in the harbor in a vessel in dry dock, known as a hospital, which is considered to be a boat parked on the land. Okay? But when you're born and harbored by the harbor master in this vessel in dry dock, you are considered a ward of the state. So you are placed into a maternity ward. Why are you a ward of the state? Because you have not yet been brought under the laws of this old school Masonic system. Now, how they get you into this old school Masonic system is with the birth certificate. So you're considered a ward of the state or an outlaw because you're not yet under the laws of the old Masonic system until your mother signs a birth certificate. This is a commercial instrument, okay? This is saying that you are now owned and under the laws of this Masonic system, but you are owned and that you are nothing more than a piece of cargo or a vessel or a dead person that's presumed to be missing, dead, or lost at sea, right? Once you're legged into this massive corporate construct, and it's a global construct, you are then subject to the laws of the state. State of affairs, not state of California or state of Nevada. We're talking global state of affairs. You're legged into the state.
It's in favor of the banks. It's certainly not in favor of the people. What happens when you have a child is your child is given a social security number. They estimate how many taxes your child is going to pay over his or her lifetime. And they take that birth certificate and they issue it on the capital markets and they earn money on it.
Once that happens, you are then under the laws of this entire global construct.
I'm saying something much worse, actually. What I'm saying is that when every citizen goes into the court system, they are not seen there as themselves a U.S. citizen. They're seen as the person who had their birth certificate pledged. You're there as a debtor. You're not there as a citizen. We have been converted from human beings that are citizens of the Republic of the United States into chattel. Chattel, that is a legal term for something which is property. We are now considered to be property of the Federal Reserve. We're not considered to be human beings and citizens of the United States.
These are the pillars of the laws of this global construct. Admiralty and maritime, and civil jurisdiction. Law of the sea, law of the land. Law of the sea has always been held by the King of Great Britain. Okay, that's how he runs his entire country. It's considered a vessel, a great big boat, and all the people in that boat are considered to be missing, dead, or presumed lost at sea with their birth certificate system. That's how he runs his whole country. And that's the same thing we're doing here in the United States. Why? Because Great Britain has always been our Postmaster General here in the colonies and the 50 states. Now let me explain what Postmaster General of the world is. Okay, this is our vessel. This is planet Earth. This is the vessel that we're all floating around on in this sea of space we call the solar system or the galaxy. This is our outpost, right? Our boat. The Postmaster General, or the General of the Post, is Great Britain. Always has been. This is an old school Masonic warfare platform, planetary warfare platform based upon shipping, postal, and banking wars. Okay, I've explained the shipping to you. The postal revolves around timelines. When you're brought into a jail, the timelines kick off, whether it's a federal offense, state offense, or local offense. Different venues have different timelines, okay, and there's several. His whole system is enforced in the courts around the world. This whole system is enforced in the courts, and what they're enforcing is the elemental chart, his strategic metals contract, his styles manual, and the dictionary, which is basically the entire system all of us are using, the grammatical construct we all use. All of these contracts and this entire system is enforced in the courts around the world. Those are called the neutral ports. That's where the wars are fought in relation to this entire matter, right? If you got a grievance, you go into the courts or the neutral ports and you fight it out. But this thing is set up to make sure that he always wins, okay? This entire system is set up so that you never win. All they look at you as is a piece of cargo, a boat or a vessel that can be harvested, raped, plundered, and pillaged for its goods. So this is the old school Masonic system that these guys have set up, and this is what is being defended on planet Earth, okay? This whole system belongs to the King of Great Britain, or is run and defended by the King of Great Britain. Okay, so he is the Postmaster General of the world. All of the countries on planet Earth are utilizing and playing with this system, okay? Doesn't matter if you're in Russia, China, or Germany. If you get married here in the United States, you're still considered to be married in Russia, China, or Germany. If you get divorced, you're considered divorced all over the world, right? Because the courts are all connected. Everybody's playing this game. It's a big, old school Masonic system that they utilize to control the people and run the planet with. This is the old school monarchical system that commands and controls the entire planet, or at least is attempting to. All of the countries on planet Earth are utilizing this Masonic warfare platform, okay? And as they are all high-ranking Masons, all of them, okay? Not Masons in the form of guys who are setting up sidewalks and driveways, okay? They're not those type of Masons. These Masons build governments. They build them and they defend them. The contracts that I pointed out that the King of Great Britain has, all the countries have those same contracts. They all have their own strategic metals contract in place that allows them to print and mint their own coinage based upon their banking system, okay? Everybody has commodities that they trade around the world with each other, and that's what those banking systems are based upon. Oil being one of the biggest. And the King of Great Britain is the reigning monarch on the planet. That's why he is the Postmaster General of the world. What we're going to look at is where the crown derives its authorizations or its authorities that their entire system is based upon. Okay, real quick, let's go back and recover some American history, okay? Back when the colonies were founded, there was 13 colonies originally. And before the American Revolution broke out, our post office was the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania Post Office, the Benjamin Franklin Post Office, okay, or Postal Court, which is here. And once the American Revolution had broke out, the king had cut off our ability to conduct international trade and commerce out of that post office because we went to war against Great Britain, right? So the war, all wars vacate that kind of contract. So our shipping was cut off. After the American Revolution, we couldn't open commerce back up through this post office because we owed 1.6 million francs to the French for funding the American Revolution. So at that point, the King of Spain and the King of France argued over who was going to be the Postmaster General here in the United States to open it up to international trade and commerce. Right? Spain said that they had found America first. Christopher Columbus had discovered the New World first, and so they had rights to it. France said that without loaning America the 1.6 million francs, the United States wouldn't even be open for capture. But the King of Great Britain, still being the reigning monarch in the world, said those are my people, and I'm going to put my post office in up there and open this thing up to trade and commerce. You guys need to stand down. So that's how he became the Postmaster General of the United States. And the Canada location has always been attached to that postal location as well. So the King of Great Britain took tactical command and control of the entire North American continent in the process. So if the other reigning monarchs and dictators of the world wanted to come into our country, or the United States, and rape and pillage it for its natural resources and its goods, they'd have to go through him and his post office to do so. So everything that was shipped in and out of the country, all trade and commerce, he got a piece up through that post office. Just like he did down in the East Indies. He is taking tactical command and control of the movement and shipment of all goods on planet Earth. That's his end goal. Okay, now there was a long-range objective that had been placed into motion here by the Crown, the Vatican, and London City and the Rothschilds, okay? And the reason the American Revolution had kicked off was because the United States wanted to float its currency into the global market. And because they based their monetary system on the value of the land, it never fluctuates. It's a solid base, right? But the Rothschilds fluctuate gold and silver up and down in relation to what they have going on. And because our currency doesn't fluctuate, when these guys would drop the price of gold down, America could buy it up and eventually would become the global power on the planet. So the Rothschilds attacked the Crown, and the Crown said, you guys can't do that, and as a matter of fact, this is war against me, and I'm not going to let that happen. So that was the reason for the American Revolution. But the long-range objective was to get the United States to borrow money from these guys in an effort to surrender them back to Great Britain. And how that was going to work was you only get 3 chances to pay off the debt that you borrow from these guys. And if you can't pay it off, then the Crown will step in, pay the debt to these guys off for you, and then capture you back as part of his system or part of Great Britain. And you'd all become peasants and serfs again. And this entire thing revolved around the year 1999. This is an event horizon year, not just for the United States, but for the entire planet. Okay, so when the colonies had come out of the American Revolution and the king stepped in as Postmaster General for the United States, the U.S. Constitution was drafted. Okay, and the U.S. Constitution outlined how the king's government was going to interact with the colonies in relation to international trade and commerce. Okay, and this thing was seen by Patrick Henry and the colonials as so tyrannical that they created the Bill of Rights, outlining, or I should say, laying out what it was that the King of Great Britain and that federal government, the Fed, would never have the power to infringe upon, because they knew that this king was so tyrannical, eventually he would enforce his authority into the states' territories and try to tell you what you could and couldn't say, what you could and couldn't write, right? The freedom of the press, that you couldn't bear arms, you wouldn't have the right to defend your country. So those things were all outlined here in the Bill of Rights, and those are the things the king would never have the power to infringe upon, ever. It was done. It was the only thing that ratified the U.S. Constitution. And they were not going to sign it. The colonials refused to sign it until these guys, the Fed, accepted this outline. The reason that 1999 is an event horizon year is because in 1999 was the end of the third and final international bankruptcy for the United States. And we were going to be surrendered back over to Great Britain because we couldn't afford to pay the debt to London and the Rothschilds and the 13 banking families off. But that meant that the U.S. Constitution had come to an end. It was over. It was the end of the third and final international bankruptcy, and the contract between us and Great Britain expired.
They incorporated the United States as a company, and they made the President of the United States the Chief Executive Officer, and they made the representatives of Congress managers. And so when people come to Congress, they're taught very quickly that their constituents are not what it's all about. What it's all about is for them to get on the dole of the federal government, which is there to enslave the people who live in the United States. That's what that is.
So what does that mean the U.S. Constitution had come to an end? Well, it was the end of the third and final international bankruptcy for the United States. And with the end of the third and final international bankruptcy, the King of Great Britain had to vacate the position as Postmaster General due to international banking law. And the trustee between us and Great Britain, or the bankruptcy, has always been the President of the United States. Well, if there's no more bankruptcy, then there's no more need for a trustee. The agreement with us and Great Britain is over. So, no bankruptcy, no trustee. So in 1999, there should not have been a presidential election held. The U.S. Congress should have been shut down, the Senate should have been shut down, everybody should have been fired, and we should have held a new constitutional convention and resubstantiated the entire government from the ground up. And they never told the American people about any of it. Now, with the end of the American Revolution, the United States didn't have a strategic metals contract in place. Okay, we weren't allowed to print and mint our own coinage, so we had to borrow it from these guys, from the Rothschilds and London City, authorized by the Crown, because the Crown has a strategic metals contract in place, and that's what we've been utilizing. In 1933, with the Great Depression, actually 1929, is when the beginning of the third and final international bankruptcy had started, or the end of the second had come to an end. Because we were borrowing money from these guys over here, we're now in usury with this system. Okay, so That is how we're captured in usury with these guys over here. We're using their money. We're not allowed to make or create our own. And as a matter of fact, we're borrowing it and paying it back with interest in hard, natural assets. Okay, all of this is going somewhere, okay? This is all going back to David Windmiller and Russell J. Gould and what they have done to the planet that everybody needs to be made aware of. Before we get into that, you have to understand what it was they ran headlong into that they had no idea was going on the planet, okay, that pretty much stopped what they were doing right in its tracks, and vice versa. Okay, so this is where the banking warfare and the warfare against the United States really kicks off. Back in 1933, Roosevelt was in office, and a Nazi coup inspired and led by Gerald McGuire, backed by Prescott Bush, J.P. Morgan, Remington, and Goodyear, were trying to get Roosevelt out of office. And what they did was they tried to elicit the help of General Smedley Butler of the United States Marine Corps in an effort to help them get Roosevelt out of office. They figured that with Butler's influence over the American soldiers, that he could assemble 500,000 men and help them get Roosevelt out.
Let me warn you, and let me warn the nation against the smooth evasion that says, of course we believe these things. We believe in Social Security. We believe in work for the unemployed. We believe in saving homes. Cross our hearts and hope to die. We believe in all these things. But we do not like the way the present administration is doing them. Just turn them over to us. We will do all of them. We will do more of them. We will do them better. And most important of all, the doing of them will not cost anybody anything.
Thank God for Smedley Butler. He blew the whistle, and their plan failed. However, these corporate heads, J.P. Morgan, Remington, Goodyear, and the others, were never indicted for this treasonous act. And so it continued on in the shadows. From there, it's been one long-range orchestrated event to get these guys into the White House. A few years later, Eisenhower comes into office. And under his watch, the CIA gets set up. And Eisenhower then gave a masterful speech on a conspiracy that he was worried about. And he told the American people, keep an eye on the military-industrial complex because he saw it as extremely dangerous.
Throughout America's adventure in free government, our basic purposes have been to keep the peace, to foster progress in human achievement, and to enhance liberty, dignity, and integrity among peoples and among nations. To strive for less would be unworthy of a free and religious people. Progress toward these noble goals is persistently threatened by the conflict now engulfing the world. It commands our whole attention, absorbs our very beings. We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method. Unhappily, the danger it poses promises to be of indefinite duration.
Under Eisenhower's watch, the Five-Star Trust was set up by the CIA. The Five-Star Trust consisted of 5 top men, those being George Bush Sr., Richard Armitage, General Edward Lansdale, William Colby, and General Robert L. Ferreira. Those were the 5 guys that ran the Five-Star Trust for the CIA. Now, what the Five-Star Trust was, their objective was to set up the largest drug and money laundering system the world had ever seen. It was called Operation Studebaker and Operation Clean Room, which was the money laundering systems into the operation. And that was ran out of Kentucky by Marion Horn, a gentleman named Marion Horn. The main objective of this operation was to create money for the CIA so they wouldn't have to go and ask Congress for money. Doing so might divulge plans the CIA had going on. So they developed the largest drug and money laundering system the world has ever seen. The objective of which was to set up a drug running operation and then put all the money into a conglomeration of banks set up by the Rothschilds and the 13 banking families known as the Five Star Trust. That is Lucifer's Sustainable Development Fund. Okay, that's Lucifer's piggy bank. I'm just going to say it. So, once this all got set up, Kennedy came into office. And Kennedy warned us of a massive conspiracy that scared him so bad, he created U.S. Special Forces.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
And he began working for the people to try to get the Federal Reserve out of here and get us back on a silver standard.
And that is, we can have honest, solid currency, like what President Kennedy was doing 10 days before he was assassinated.
Unfortunately, John F. Kennedy was murdered for his efforts. Eventually, George Bush Sr. becomes head of the CIA. And Reagan takes office. And sees this whole thing going on and warns the American people about it. He made several speeches warning the American people about the same thing Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy did.
Now let's set the record straight. There's no argument over the choice between peace and war, but there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have it in the next second: surrender. Admittedly, there's a risk in any course we follow other than this, but every lesson of history tells us that the greater risk lies in appeasement. And this is the specter our well-meaning liberal friends refuse to face, that their policy of accommodation is appeasement. And it gives no choice between peace and war, only between fight or surrender. If we continue to accommodate, continue to back and retreat, eventually we have to face the final demand, the ultimatum. And what then? When Nikita Khrushchev has told his people he knows what our answer will be. He has told them that we're retreating under the pressure of the Cold War, and someday, when the time comes to deliver the final ultimatum, our surrender will be voluntary, because by that time, we will have been weakened from within spiritually, morally, and economically. He believes this because from our side he's heard voices pleading for peace at any price, or better read than death, or as one commentator put it, he'd rather live on his knees than die on his feet. And therein lies the road to war, because those voices don't speak for the rest of it. You and I know and do not believe that life is so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. If nothing in life is worth dying for, when did this begin? Just in the face of this enemy? Or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery under the Pharaohs? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Bridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shot heard round the world? The martyrs of history were not fools. And our honored dead, who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis, didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay, there is a point beyond which they must not advance. Winston Churchill said the destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn they're spirits, not animals. He said there's something going on in time and space and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
He was talking about Christianity and how if we ever became an atheistic country or a socialistic dictatorship under an atheistic regime, the United States would go down. So he tried to do everything in his power he could to stop what was going on. And George Bush Sr. tried 5 times to assassinate Kennedy. That's all been declassified. Sometime after that, George Bush Sr. becomes President of the United States. Now, this was a long-range warfare objective to get here, and they finally got there. Once this drug and money laundering system was all set up, they were going to then empower the United Nations to institute a global tax on everyone. At this particular juncture, by then, there is $230 million quadrillion dollars in the Sustainable Development Fund that these guys are using as a black ops shadow government bank account. If they install a global tax on everyone in the world, how much bigger is this bank account going to get? At this point, the CIA was just going to be used to continue to go in and soften other countries up in a New World Order effort that was being launched out of the White House.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
The long-range objective. Now, this was all heading for the Event Horizon year of 1999. That's where this is all going. This is an Event Horizon year for the country and for the globe. Because once George Bush Sr. got in to be President of the United States, he saw the end of the third and final international bankruptcy coming, and he knew that the U.S. Constitution would dissolve, and the agreement between us and Great Britain would be dissolved at that point or voided and gone. The U.S. Constitution was going to be gone. So he went back to the Crown, told his cousins what was going on, and they knighted him. The plan was to resubstantiate the U.S. Constitution so the king could still continue to oversee the international affairs in relation to shipping and commerce of the United States, and the New World Order would be launched out of Washington, D.C., and like I said, a global tax would be instituted by the United Nations, and their plans would be fulfilled. But before they can do that, they have to bring all the banks in under one banking system, under the Rothschilds banking system. So, the next objective, the Middle East. They got to go into the Middle East and get the oil. Why? Because there's only 9 banks left in the world that are not ran by the Rothschilds, 7 of which are in the Middle East. So if they go in and steal the oil, then the banks have nothing to create a banking system off of. They collapse, and then they got to borrow money from here. The warfare is real simple.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got come in, you got to come in and talk to me a second. I said, well, you're too busy. He said, no. He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, we're going to war with Iraq. Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. So I said, well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no. He says, there's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today. And he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. So the truth is about the Middle East is, had there been no oil there, it would be like Africa. Nobody is threatening to intervene in Africa. The problem is the opposite. We keep asking for people to intervene and stop it. And there's no question that the presence of petroleum throughout the region has sparked great power involvement. Whether that was the specific motivation for the coup or not, I can't tell you, but there's always been this attitude that somehow we could intervene and use force in the region.
You cannot have a war where there is no enemy. You don't have an enemy. Show me the enemy. There is no enemy. The enemies are, or the enemy is, anyone who does not go along with their new world order effort. That's who they're targeting, and that's who their terrorists are. This is a very simple warfare effort to follow. This entire soap opera is very easy to follow. The next thing they want are your guns, and they're going to come hard for them. They're going to come hard for guns here in America. That is the one thing that is stopping them from taking absolute, total, tactical command and control of this nation. And if they ever come for your guns, that is when you will have surrendered everything. They've already attacked your freedom of your right to choose, your freedom of speech, your freedom of the press, and now they're onto the Second Amendment. They are coming for our guns, but they will not get them. Anyone signing on to that kind of legislation, Nancy Pelosi being number one, wants to surrender your borders, take your weapons, force you to buy health care. These are your new world order extremists, okay? These guys are all working for Lucifer. They want a one world global dictator at the top. Who is it? It's Lucifer. We all know it. Biblical prophecy. Now, prior to 1999, there were 2 gentlemen who were working to get themselves out of the Masonic global government system that we've all been enslaved to through the birth certificate system. Those 2 men were Russell J. Gould and David Wynn Miller, or Russell-J. Gould and David-Wynn Miller. David-Wynn Miller was the one who broke the mathematical interface on math and grammar. And here's the equation for that. Anybody that's been out there and studying this, I'm not going to go too far into. Russell J. Gould was the individual who then imparted the now time aspect into this grammatical construct, thereby giving it its own jurisdiction. So at this point, they knew that they had a whole new system of grammar that the world had never seen, that now, being set up the way it was, needed to be utilized to create an entirely new government system off of. So they had to go all the way back to where the crown derives its authorities. They went back, all the way back into the Masonic books, and we'll just throw one out there, The Secret Teachings of Manly P. Hall, Secret Teachings of All Ages. They went back and they syntaxed this book and then rewrote it in this quantum construct, in this now time grammatical quantum construct. And they did that with all of the books, all of the Masonic books that are utilized to substantiate the Crown's authorizations here in the world, thereby giving their system its own venue. They've created an entirely new federal government system for the entire world to now join with. And it is a global federal government system, and it is based in truth. The entire system is based on mathematically certifiable grammar. It has its own elemental chart and periodic tables that one unwinds, creates a mathematical fact forward and backward in both directions. When this elemental chart and periodic table unwinds itself, it creates a finity loop or a figure 8, thereby validating itself forward and backwards, just like the grammatical construct does. This thing was genius. Knowing what these men had at their fingertips, all they needed was the right time and place in history to launch this thing and take the greatest leap of faith ever taken by any two gentlemen ever recorded in the history of this planet. Once this thing was all set up, the books that they had syntaxed, they had filed with the Vatican and the NSA and several other locations on planet Earth. And the Vatican had been studying it for 5 years prior to what eventually took place in 1999. Russell J. Gould, with the help of David Wynn Miller, in 1999 saw the end of the third and final international bankruptcy coming. And Russell, knowing what was about to take place here, ran down to the United Nations and asked the United Nations if they had copyright and patent on the Title IV flag. Knowing that it didn't matter if they did or they didn't, the contract would have been found to have been in grammatical fraud and grammatical error. So he rewrote the copyright and patent for the Title IV flag for the United States because it was about to be surrendered back over to Great Britain along with the country at the end of the third and final international bankruptcy. So he takes off up to the United Nations with the Title IV flag in tow and legs this whole government system in. And there at the United Nations, he was declared a sovereign. In the process, he had just taken down the entire old monarch's system. Because once they reestablished those Masonic books, they had to resubstantiate all of them in a quantum grammar construct, thereby disqualifying the old system completely from the bloodlines on. And in that effort, have set this entire global government system up for the world. Russ then turns back around, and during that 18-day vacancy that post office was open, the king had to vacate due to international banking law for 18 days. Russell legs back in down here at the post office in Washington, D.C., taking tactical command and control of the United States and Canada, because that post office has always been attached to the D.C. location. And in doing so, he just brought to an end the New World Order effort to surrender the United States back over to the Crown, utilize the United Nations to install a global tax, because no one has a charter to exist anymore as a corporation under his authority. Everything has been disqualified. It's over. So prior to 1999, Russell J. Gould had rewritten a new U.S. Constitution, a Bill of Rights, a Declaration of Independence. He had resubstantiated the charter for all of the federal municipalities. He had captured the flag for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and the Coast Guard, and resubstantiated the entire construct in a quantum global effort, or quantum global manner. Thereby in 1999, when he moved into the Washington, D.C. postal location, taking tactical command and control of the United States and the rest of the North American continent, the New World Order and the Crown didn't have authorization to send our military to war for them after 9/11 had occurred, because they didn't have the authorization to do so, they had been disqualified. It was over. But you got to remember, this was an act of patriotism on his part. This is a patriot for the country. This guy is from Wyoming. Okay? This guy's a patriot to the country. He saw the end of the third and final international bankruptcy coming. He knew we were about to be surrendered back over to Great Britain, along with the flag, and it would hang like this in a surrendered manner. And he did his duty as a patriot. He stepped in where he needed to step in, and he saved the country and the flag from being surrendered. And he's still holding on to that Title IV flag for the people of this country and safeguarding it for the people of this country. Now, even more astounding was that prior to 1999 and him taking tactical command and control of Washington, D.C., he had built a brand new banking system. That's what this is. That is the banking system he put together. And at the same time as he legged into Washington, D.C., taking tactical command and control of the entire country, he legged this banking system in at the U.S. Treasury Department. So now we can get rid of the Fed. The Fed can go bye-bye. Shouldn't have been here since 1999. Once the charter expired and the bankruptcy had come to an end, the Federal Reserve did not have the authorization at that point to continue to print money for the United States, and the IRS was actually kicked out of the country because that was the collection agency for the debt. Well, if there's no more debt, there's no more need for an IRS. As a sovereign, he has a strategic metals contract that is based upon his elemental chart and his periodic table, giving him the authorization to print and mint his own coinage. This is the first time in the history of the country that this country actually has the power to print and mint its own coinage. We do not have to use the strategic metals contract of the old monarch. It's over. This was an act of patriotism. This was all due to the circumstances that revolved around the third and final international bankruptcy of this country coming to an end. And thank God we were saved. So after legging back in as Postmaster General here for the United States, he then proceeded to go around the world and reauthorize everything under his authority that would authorize or substantiate this system in its totality. So he had to go all the way back to the International Admiralty and Maritime Organization and reauthorize it under the Quantum Authority. He had to go back to the Universal Postal Union in Bern, Switzerland, and reauthorize it under his authority. He had to go back to the International Bureau of Weights and Measures and reauthorize it under his authority because he had just destroyed all banking and chemistry on planet Earth with this elemental chart and this periodic table in association with this system of weights and measures in conjunction with the grammar. He had to go back into the International Patent Office because this all has to be patented. So it disqualified all the old patents on planet Earth all the way back to the very, very beginning. So he had to resubstantiate all that. And all of that needs to be resubstantiated. Everybody's patent on all of their products now have to be resubstantiated in this quantum manner or under this quantum global construct and system. That way their patents can't be harvested, stolen by the old system any longer. They've all been saved. Everything has been saved. But he had to go around the planet and set this whole thing back up under his authority, all these locations. And what they ended up doing when the United Nations said, well, okay, but what land do you choose? They said, him and Dave said, they choose the land of the courts during the time of the contract. Why? Because that is where the courts, or all of the contracts, are defended, is in the courts. Well, that's why Dave keeps talking about we own the land of the courts, because their system just took down the old system, and the old system was enforced in the courts. Well, this system now rules the courts. So if you bring your old grammatical system in there and your old contracts into the courts, and they're not done properly, correctly, and truthfully, using the quantum grammar construct, they are disqualified and nullified as grammar fraud and bank fraud, all of it, across the board. Now, after coming back into the United States, after having run this gamut, he came back into the United States, and when he did, the five-star trust guys grabbed him up. Bush and the boys grabbed him up and literally beat the living shit out of this guy in an effort to get him to surrender that flag. These are the guys who have swept this all under the rug and have proceeded to move forward in their attempt to surrender the United States back over to the New World Order, or to Great Britain, finish constructing their New World Order, go into the Middle East, steal the oil. They're heading back down to Venezuela to get Chavez out of there so they can get his banking system closed down. And once they have it all under wraps, they will then present the mark of the beast to everyone. However, Russell J. Gould did not surrender the flag, and he did not surrender his position. They took him into court and they literally beat the hell out of this guy on a couple of different occasions, and he won. And the Navy was behind him and supporting him all the way. We don't know what happened to that contingency. We can't speculate. We do have a couple of ideas. However, after 12 years of these guys not wanting to play ball and just do things correctly and move forward with this entire new global government system, Russell J. Gould, seeing that the Benjamin Franklin Post Office had now come out of bankruptcy, and had come out of bankruptcy in 1999, right? But nobody remembered it. Nobody saw it. So what he did was, when he came back into Washington, D.C. and filed the flag in there and legged in as the Postmaster General for the United States and as the new Postmaster General of the world, he rewrote a new U.S. Constitution between his government and ours. And it's the same version of the one we had with Great Britain. Only this one doesn't have the 1 million laws attached to it that finally were created by the Congress and the Senate in relation to this system, because we know there's always been two governments operating here, the King of Great Britain's and ours. That's why you get the two-party system, right? The Democratic and the Republican. So he rewrote the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It's still standing. The Declaration of Independence is still standing. And because they didn't want to move forward with it and wanted to keep going forward with this New World Order surrender effort in the year 2012, and on the date December 21st, 2012, end of the Mayan calendar, he legs back in down here at the Philadelphia Post Office in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Benjamin Franklin Postal Court or Post Office, and reopen the entire U.S. government back up for the people with a new U.S. Constitution, the same Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and it's all been quantized into this mathematical, grammatical fact. He saved the United States from surrender and takeover. He has saved the planet from a New World Order effort to conquer us. He has saved the planet from a New World Order effort under one man, a global dictator we all know as Lucifer, and has stopped them from being able to present the mark of the beast to all of us and attach us to this banking system as slaves. It's all been disqualified. It's all been shut down. It's over. The victory is ours. This is Our Lady of Victory. This is our victory. It's just being kept from the people of the United States and the people of the world, and they're just not telling you the story in this manner because they don't want you to know about this system. And they said every time it pops up, they are going to ridicule the shit out of it in every manner possible, because they said the American people are too stupid to believe, let alone understand any of this information. Now what he has done is he has purified the whore of Babylon and prepared her as the bride of Christ. And now he's got one foot in the sea, which is the Admiralty and Maritime Jurisdiction, which was held by the King of Great Britain up in Washington, D.C., and he has the civil jurisdiction law of the land, the terra firma the Admiralty footing and the terra firma footing. And he's bridging the gap, rapturing you out of the land of the dead, where you're once considered to be missing or presumed to be dead or lost at sea with your birth certificate system, ships you in through the Washington, D.C. postal location, out through the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania postal location, civil jurisdiction law of the land, where the blood testifies to the life, and you are brought back into the land of the living. and saved. Your soul is saved. Your country is saved. You are saved. This is Our Lady of Victory. Now you got to remember, the New World Order wasn't waiting for God to send down the seventh angel to fix everything, right? These guys are waiting for Lucifer to stand up and give everyone the mark of the beast. So what happened after 1999? What you had happen there was a private corporation move into Washington, D.C. to run the government for the people of the United States, and it was under the command and control of George Bush Jr., who then declared war on the Middle East after they dropped the trade centers in New York. This was an orchestrated warfare plan by this group, the same group that started here. Okay, this was the same group of folks that initiated this bombing. If there were ever any weapons of mass destruction, they would have used the weapon of mass destruction to bomb the World Trade Centers. They wouldn't have flown a plane into it or into them. So these guys ultimately got what they wanted. They got tactical command and control of the militaries to go fight their wars so they could set up their one world global government. The next administration that moved in 8 years later, once again, a private corporation. The first corporation was identifying itself with a 3x5 boat flag. It's not registered with the United Nations as the Title IV flag is, or any other flags around the world are. They're much longer. Okay, they're coffin flags. They're long enough to cover a coffin. The 3x5 boat flag is not. It's a replica of the Title IV flag. 8 years after this guy was in office, a second administration moves in to run the country, and they've got a 2.5 by 2.5 size flag, Obama. This is a Ken and Barbie flag. It's not registered with any country in the world, anywhere. You could buy it at Toys R Us. And as a matter of fact, I don't even think they sell them there. So this corporation comes in and says, yes, we can. Yes, we can what? Force you to buy health care? That removes your freedom of choice. So now they've attacked your freedom of choice, your freedom of speech, your freedom of the press, and now they're coming after your guns, your Second Amendment. They're just chipping away at it. Everything you guys are seeing broadcast on the Television is a psychological warfare effort. The Television is still registered by the FCC as an entertainment device. Nothing coming out of it has to be real or even is real. That's why you hear Trump today saying it's all fake news. Everything you guys are seeing is what these guys are broadcasting that they want you to follow. That is their global narrative. Okay, the global narrative is there's a war on terror. You can't have a war on fear. Fear, terror, spookiness. Okay, you can't have a war where there's no known enemy. The folks over there in the Middle East are just trying to simply fight off a foreign invasion and kick us out of their country. These guys are just trying to go in, crush the banks. They got to steal the oil out of there using the Caspian Sea pipelines. That's the overall objective. And that is that's the global narrative. Well, in psychological operations or psychological warfare, tactical command and control of the global narrative is what we strive for. However, this is the global narrative now. This is our victory. This is Our Lady of Victory, guys. It has defeated all of this across the board. We don't have to follow none of it. We've got to get these guys out of power here in the country. They don't have a flag. They don't have authorization. They don't have a charter that's been authorized correctly by the new Federal Postmaster General of the world. It's all been taken down, yet they still continue to move forward with their surrender back over to Great Britain or to the New World Order, this New World Order effort to create a one world global government with one person at the top. We all know it's Lucifer. They want your guns next. That is it. You're going to see it broadcast on the televisions. Anything they can drum up, any story whatsoever in relation to guns or a gun killing or a murder or anything, they are going to whip any little thing they can into a national frenzy. This, again, is psychological warfare. They're taking anything they possibly can and spinning it into a national issue, as though the whole nation is crying out, oh, take our guns, we shouldn't have guns. That's what they want you to think is being cried out for here in this country, when indeed it is not. It is being broadcast out of the televisions. It is a psychological warfare effort, and that is the last vestige. That's all they need here. And once you give that up, you will give up everything. Everything you've got, they will take it from you. You see the people of Great Britain? What do they have? Nothing. They have absolutely nothing. That is what you will have if they come and take your guns. You need to wisen up.
It really all depends on whether people understand that the media that is giving them disinformation is owned by the Federal Reserve and this system of control. And it's really up to humanity to realize that they're being hoodwinked, that when they turn on the news and they get the news from the mainstream media, they're just being fed propaganda.
This is the very thing Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, and President Ronald Reagan warned the United States about. Do not surrender. Never surrender. Never surrender your beliefs. Never surrender your morality. Never surrender your Christian beliefs and your faiths. Never surrender. We are a nation of peace. And this entire system was defeated through peace. Thank God.
They believe in perpetual imbalance. They want to have artificially created crises around the world that will further increase their wealth.
They also believe in manufactured crises and permanent wars, because wars are profitable, and the more that are fought, the wealthier they get. They want absolute control of education, to program the public mind, to train those chosen for various roles, and to train others to be compliant.
They want centralized control of education. They want us all to be learning their propaganda.
One size fits all. The size they determine, the size they want, the size that benefits them at the expense of everybody else.
They want centralized control of foreign and domestic policies. They want the United Nations to become the world government. They want United Nations taxes.
They want the UN to act as a de facto world government, imposing a UN tax on everybody in the world.
They want expanded trading blocs such as NAFTA and the European Union to reduce the importance of individual countries and of individuals to have control over their destinies.
They want global trade policies, rules that they make that benefit them, and again, that harm everybody else. A global WTO, World Trade Organization. Again, they make the rules, nobody else does.
They want to expand NATO and other regional military forces, again, to weaken the power of individual countries.
They want NATO to be a global world enforcer. Challenge them, and NATO will ravage your country, murder your children, enslave you, destroy your country, to turn it to rubble. That's the role they want NATO to play. That's the perfect Bilderberg world. They make the rules. Everything goes the way they want. Anybody dissented, kill them. That's the Bilderberg world.
Now, this is exactly what we're doing. This is exactly what we're seeing. The United States military was duped. We're being led by psychopaths, idiots, morons, banksters, greedy bastards, and crazy people. Our military needs to be brought home, and we need to start working on the borders here and cleaning these senior offices out. That's what U.S. Special Forces was created for. That's why Kennedy created them, to liberate the oppressed. Well, that's us, guys. We're being oppressed by this entire system. And that's when he created you. He told you that there was a conspiracy so vast that it scared the shit out of him. And he created U.S. Special Forces to help clean it out. Okay, so that's your job up there, SF. It's not going around and doing the things you're doing, guerrilla warfare tactics. in other countries. You're supposed to be helping clean these banksters and these mobsters and these gangsters out of the United States, out of senior offices, and if necessary, go state to state to train the militias, the National Guard and the state militias. The people are to assemble, and that is their duty. The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. And that is because if the government ever becomes tyrannical, or the administration up there, the federal administration, which is a contract government, right? A contract system. If it ever becomes tyrannical and tries to invade and force its authority into the state's territories, it is to be stopped and replaced, if necessary, completely. Well, now we have the opportunity as a nation, thanks to David Wynn Miller and Russell J. Gould, who have established a brand new federal system, a global federal government system. They're the only guys in the history of the world to ever do this. Pull this off, gentlemen. And it's high time we took a damn good look at it once again. And it's time that we bring these guys forward and start talking to them. Unfortunately, we can't bring Dave forward. It's a travesty. The gentleman has died. But Russell J. Gould is still here. And he is who he is. The American people need to be made aware of the situation. They need to be made aware of this quantum grammar construct and the magnitude and gravity, size and scope of what it is he set up. And it needs to be recognized by the military, by the rest of the NCO chain of command, so that the enlisted personnel understand it as well. This can't be held a secret anymore by the senior levels and kept hidden at the senior levels. This thing's got to come forward. It's our saving grace. This is what the people of the world have been screaming about. It's what they've been praying about. It's biblically prophesied to come forward, and it's here. Why are we keeping this a secret? Why are we not moving forward with this? I ask you. What the hell are we doing on planet Earth as a group of men? Right? Because I'm not a boat or a vessel. I sure the hell don't belong to somebody else, and I sure the hell am not someone else's piece of cargo. If they're going to rape, plunder, and pillage, and allow me to only make what I make just so I can barely scrape by. Alright, that shit's over. We need to take a look at his banking system. It's a 10% flat tax, and that seriously needs to be brought forward as soon as possible. This Federal Reserve shit's out the door. Okay, they do nothing but work to enrich themselves. And you know, I'm hoping that with the military up there in Washington, D.C., that Donald Trump and these guys are planning to bring this whole system that Miller and Gould set up forward. That's what we're hoping for. A bunch of us are hoping for it. Everybody's watching, okay? And from what we understand, that is the plan. This is all orchestrated, every bit of it. And it needs to come to a stop. Because these psychopaths aren't running this world anymore. It's over. And they know it. You know, they've been defeated across the board with this quantum system. And if we're not careful, they're going to steal it. Every bit of it, lock, stock, and barrel. And use it to put the screws back down on the people. When in actuality it was created to take the screws off the people. Lift all the laws. It's a blank slate again, guys. Commander Gould rebuilt the U.S. Constitution. First things first, right? U.S. Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence. It's all been quantized. It's there. But it just doesn't have the 2 million laws that these jackals up in D.C., the Congress and the Senate, attached to it later to bilk the shit out of us, to harvest us as the harvest, right? I'll pay 10% to the church and I'll pay 10% in taxes. Flat tax on whatever I buy. But I'm not paying no income tax, no 10% income tax. And it's worse than that. It's at like 1/3. They're taxing us for 1/3 of our income. 1/3 of your income. That's a house payment every month for most people. Right? I paid for a house. Where's my house? The American people deserve better. It's out there. It's waiting. God brought it down. It's sitting. And it needs to be recognized by the people of the United States. I'm asking you guys. Do your due diligence. Research all of this. Watch their videos. Listen to them speak. they're going to tell you exactly what I've laid down here for you already. They set up an entirely new corporate federal government system, and it's global. And it took down all that it took down on the planet and replaced it all. It purified the whore of Babylon and prepared her as the bride of Christ. It's the exact same system we're using now. It's just been purified of all of the loopholes and all of the bullshit, right, that they've been using to enrich themselves. It works for them, but it doesn't work for me, right? Or they know how the loopholes work, so when I go in to try and get myself out of whatever debacle I'm in, I don't know the loopholes. It's all foreign to me. They don't teach me this in school. They don't teach our children this at the grade school level and bring them up through high school and into college knowing this stuff so that they can conduct operations on their own in a manner here in the world that is best for not just themselves, but for the people they're working with and for, right? Man to man, person to person, spirit to spirit, soul to soul, right? And this grammar system does that. The contracts allow you to do that. The grammar allows you to do that. The entire government construct allows us to do that. And that's the beauty of this thing. So please, do your due diligence, get involved, take a look at this thing again, and let's bring it forward. Let's get together as a group of military men on this planet, and let's bring it forward, and let's push. Thank you.
Because we still have Federal Reserve notes, and those pieces of paper are toilet paper. That is the very first thing that you should do, because you do not want your family not to have currency, and what you currently have is not worth anything. That's why the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are no longer paying for their international trade in dollars. Governments are no longer holding the Federal Reserve notes. We need to be you need to do your homework as citizens and find out what it means when you have Federal Reserve notes. They're valueless and they are unconstitutional, and we need to get that outfit out of here. That's the very first thing. And then the second thing is that we have to all work together to clean up the mess. And I don't think it's going to be that hard, actually, to get our republic back.
So, yeah, wild, right? Wild.